I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. At my husband's will reading, I discovered a shocking betrayal that would change everything. But if I hadn't been saved by a homeless man's scream that morning, I wouldn't be here to tell this story at all. I was on my way to the reading of my husband's will when I heard it. A gut-wrenching scream that cut through the morning air like a knife. "Ma'am, don't start that car! Your daughter-in-law!" My hands froze on the ignition key. My heart pounded so violently I could barely breathe. I turned to see a disheveled man running toward my car, his arms waving frantically as if trying to prevent a disaster. "She was here last night. I saw what she did." The air rushed out of my lungs. Olivia, my daughter-in-law, had been near my car in the dead of night? The man slammed his palms against my window, leaving dirty streaks across the glass. His eyes, bloodshot but clear, held an urgency I couldn't ignore. "Please don't start it," he begged. "I saw everything." I rolled down the window just enough to speak. "What? What did you see?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. He stepped back, his body trembling despite the warm morning. "She came with some man in a fancy suit. They opened the hood, had a little bag with them." My keys fell into my lap with a metallic clatter that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Everything began to make horrible sense. Richard, my husband of 42 years, had died just 3 weeks ago. A massive heart attack, they said. But I knew something wasn't right. Richard had always been strong. At 70, he still swam 3 times a week at the YMCA, watched his diet carefully, and had never smoked a day in his life. And then suddenly, he was gone, with only Olivia by his side when it happened. Only her. And now this stranger was telling me my daughter-in-law had tampered with my car in the middle of the night. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice still unsteady. His gaze dropped to the sidewalk. "Your husband was good to me once. Gave me coffee and a sandwich every Wednesday morning. Never looked down on me like others do." He paused, shifting uncomfortably. "Last night I dreamed about him. He told me to watch out for you." Tears filled my eyes. Richard, always so kind, always helping others when no one was looking. And now, even from wherever he was trying to protect me. With trembling legs, I stepped out of the car. The morning sun warmed my face, but I felt cold, a deep chill that came from within. I walked to the front of my old Buick, awkwardly released the hood latch and lifted it. What I saw stole my breath away. A cable had been cut, not broken but deliberately severed with precision. And there, nestled among the engine components, was a small plastic bag containing a clear liquid that smelled strongly of gasoline. My entire body began to shake. If I had started that engine, if I had pressed the gas pedal, everything would have exploded. I would have exploded. I leaned against the car, my knees suddenly weak. The world tilted around me as the truth sank in. Olivia wanted me dead. My own daughter-in-law, the woman who'd called me Mom for 15 years, who smiled at me across every holiday dinner table, had tried to murder me. It hadn't always been this way between us. When Matthew first brought Olivia home 8 years ago, she'd been charming, attentive, seemingly perfect. She'd ask about family recipes, compliment my home, bring thoughtful gifts. I'd been so happy that my only child had found someone who made him light up with joy. But over time, little things started to change. The warm smiles became practiced. Her interest in family traditions waned once the wedding was over. She began making subtle comments about our quaint lifestyle, despite the fact that Richard's construction company was worth millions. "Don't you ever want to upgrade?" she'd asked once, gesturing around our comfortable but modest home where we'd lived for 30 years. You could afford a mansion in Oakwood Heights. Richard had caught my eye across the room and winked. We'd never been interested in showing off our wealth. We'd put our money into our retirement, our lakeside cabin, and our grandson Charlie's education fund. I slammed the hood shut, wiped my tears with the back of my hand, and looked at the man who had just saved my life. "What's your name?" I asked. "Everyone calls me Jack. Some say Bones 'cause I'm skinny." He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Thank you, Jack. Thank you for listening to Richard." I took all the cash from my wallet, about $80, and pressed it into his rough hands. "I'll be back soon, and when I return, I want you to tell me everything you saw. Every detail." He nodded, clutching the money to his chest like it was a precious treasure. I called a taxi. There was no way I'd risk driving that car now. As the yellow cab wound through the familiar streets of our town, a cold certainty settled in my chest. Olivia had made a terrible mistake. She had underestimated me. She thought I was just an old, weak widow, easy to manipulate, easy to eliminate, but she was wrong, because now I knew, and a woman who knows is the most dangerous opponent of all. The worst part? I had to be at the law office in 15 minutes for the reading of Richard's will. She would be there, smiling, waiting, believing I would never arrive. The law office was waiting for me. My daughter-in-law was waiting for me, and I was going to walk through that door as if nothing had happened. But inside I was already at war. The law office of Davidson and Barnes smelled of old paper and coffee. Everything seemed designed to give solemnity to the moment. The beige walls, the paintings and gilded frames, the mahogany desk. But I didn't feel solemn. I felt nauseated. Olivia was already there when I arrived, sitting next to Matthew with her legs crossed, and that perfect smile she always used as a mask. She wore a tight black dress, discreet but elegant. Her dark hair was pulled back in a low bun, pearl earrings catching the light. Her makeup impeccable. The perfect grieving daughter-in-law. When she saw me enter, her eyes widened for just a second longer than normal. It was an almost imperceptible gesture, but I saw it. I saw the surprise. I saw the fear. She hadn't expected me to arrive alive. "Mom!" Matthew immediately stood up and hugged me. His body was tense, heavy. My son had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. He had deep dark circles under his eyes, an unshaven beard, and when he squeezed me against his chest, I felt him trembling. "My love," I whispered, stroking his back. "I'm here." Olivia also stood up. She walked toward me with measured, almost theatrical steps and hugged me with a false warmth that made my stomach churn. "Sandra," she said softly, "it's good you arrived. We were worried." Her hands on my back were cold, her designer perfume too sweet. And when she pulled away, our eyes met for an instant that was too long. I didn't look away. She did. "My car wouldn't start," I said calmly. "Had to call a cab." Something flickered across her face. Alarm, quickly masked by concern. "Oh, that old Buick," she said. "Matthew's been saying you should let him buy you something newer, something safer." "I've always been attached to things that have proven their worth," I replied, the double meaning clear only to me. "Well, let's begin." William Barnes, the attorney, a man about 60 years old with thick glasses and a blue tie, opened a leather folder on the desk. "I know this is a difficult time for the Mason family, but it is necessary to fulfill Mr. Richard's last wishes." Beside him, a young lawyer, George Reynolds, according to his nameplate, quietly took notes from the corner. I sat down opposite the desk, Matthew to my right, Olivia to my left, so close I could hear her measured breathing. The attorney began to read. At first, everything seemed normal. The main house was left to me, the personal bank accounts, too. "To my son, Matthew Richard Mason, I leave my collection of vintage woodworking tools, my father's pocket watch, and the contents of the safety deposit box at First National Bank, which includes family heirlooms and personal mementos I wish him to have. Matthew nodded slightly, tears gathering in his eyes. Those tools had been Richard's pride, collected over decades of craftsmanship. For my grandson, Charles William Mason, I establish a trust fund in the amount of $1 million for his education and future security, to be administered by Sandra Eleanor Mason until Charles reaches the age of 25. I hadn't known about this provision. Richard must have updated the will recently. Olivia's breathing quickened slightly beside me. Then came the words that changed everything. Regarding Mason Construction Company, incorporated in 1982 and all its subsidiaries and assets. Barnes paused, adjusting his glasses. This provision requires some explanation. According to our records and the documents filed with the state, ownership of Mason Construction was transferred to Olivia Jean Mason approximately 1 month before Richard's passing. The room went silent. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop. What? Matthew's voice broke the stillness. Confusion etched across his face. That can't be right. Dad would never... I have the transfer documents here, Barnes continued, his expression carefully neutral as he slid papers across the table. Signed by Richard and witnessed according to state law. The company, valued at approximately $12 million in its most recent assessment, is now legally owned by Mrs. Olivia Mason. My mind reeled. Richard would never have given the company to Olivia. Never. It was meant for Matthew, who had worked alongside his father since college. It was their shared legacy. I looked at the signature on the document. It looked like Richard's. The distinctive R with its flourish, the tight loop of the D. But something felt wrong. After 42 years of marriage, I'd seen his signature thousands of times on cards, checks, contracts. This wasn't quite right. Dad never mentioned this, Matthew said, his voice hollow with shock. Why would he... He turned to Olivia, who had composed her features into an expression of surprised modesty. He wanted to make sure the company was protected, she said softly. He was worried about his health, about what might happen if decisions needed to be made quickly. We discussed it privately. She placed her hand over Matthew's. He wanted me to help you carry on his legacy, darling. He knew how emotional you can be about business decisions. I watched my son's face, saw the confusion there, and the first flicker of doubt. Matthew had always trusted too easily, believed the best of people. It was one of the things I loved most about him, and one of the things that had made him vulnerable to Olivia. Richard never mentioned these concerns to me, I said quietly, and we discussed everything. Olivia's smile was sympathetic, condescending. Richard was protecting you, Sandra. He didn't want you to worry. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. You know how he was in those last months, forgetful sometimes, falling asleep in the middle of conversations. The doctor said it might be early signs of heart failure affecting his brain. Lies. All lies. Richard had been sharp as ever until the very end. We'd worked on a crossword puzzle together the morning before he died. He'd remembered details about a vacation we took 30 years ago. There is one final provision, Barnes continued, seemingly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. Richard left a sealed letter to be opened only in the event of his death. He instructed that it be read aloud at this meeting. He produced an envelope from the portfolio, breaking the seal with a silver letter opener. The paper inside was Richard's stationery, heavy cream stock with his initials embossed at the top. Barnes cleared his throat and began to read. If this letter is being read, then I am no longer with you. To my dear wife, Sandra, you have been my heart and my home for more than 4 decades. Everything I built with you beside me. Trust your instincts. They've always been sharper than mine. To my son, Matthew, I am proud of the man you've become. Remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch and the legacy of integrity you leave behind. To all who hear these words, appearances can deceive, and documents can be falsified, but the truth always finds its way to the light. Look closely at what seems out of place. Ask questions. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those who smile while holding a knife behind their back. With love and caution, Richard Mason. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt tears streaming down my face. Even in death, Richard was trying to warn us. He had known something was wrong. Olivia recovered first. "Poor Richard," she said, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "He became so paranoid toward the end. The doctors warned us it might happen." Matthew looked bewildered, torn between his wife's explanation and his father's cryptic warning. "I don't understand any of this," he said finally. Barnes gathered the papers, his movements deliberate. "Everything appears to be legally in order," he said. "However," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "if anyone has concerns about the circumstances surrounding these documents, there are legal avenues that can be explored." Olivia's smile tightened. "We're all upset and confused right now. Grief does strange things to people." She stood, smoothing her dress. "I think we should go home and process this information. Matthew needs rest." As they prepared to leave, George Reynolds, the young associate who had been silent throughout the meeting, approached me discreetly. "Mrs. Mason," he said quietly, "I worked closely with your husband on some matters he wanted kept confidential. If you have a moment, I believe there are things you should know." I nodded, watching as Olivia guided my son toward the door, her arm linked possessively through his. She glanced back once, her eyes meeting mine. In that moment, the mask slipped, revealing a cold calculation that sent a shiver down my spine. The game had begun. When Matthew and Olivia had left, I sat back down at the conference table with George Reynolds. He was young, early 30s perhaps, with intelligent eyes and a serious demeanor that seemed at odds with his youth. "Mrs. Mason, I need to be careful about how I proceed," he began, glancing toward the door to make sure we were alone. "Attorney-client privilege is sacred, but your husband made it clear that in the event of his death, certain information was to be shared with you." My hands trembled slightly as I clasped them in my lap. "Please, tell me everything you know." George opened his leather portfolio, extracting a thin file. "About 2 months ago, Mr. Mason came to me privately. He was concerned about some irregularities he had noticed in the company finances. Small at first, discrepancies in accounts, invoices that didn't match contracts, vendors he didn't recognize. This was news to me. Richard had always been meticulous about the company's finances, even after hiring professional accountants as the business grew. He asked me to quietly look into it without involving Mr. Barnes or anyone else at the firm. What I found troubled him greatly." George lowered his voice further. "Someone had been systematically siphoning money from the company, small amounts from multiple projects, carefully disguised as legitimate expenses. Over 2 years, it added up to nearly $300,000. My breath caught. "Did he know who?" George hesitated. He had suspicions, but wanted concrete proof before making accusations. What concerned him most was that whoever was doing this had high-level access to the company's financial systems. "Olivia," I whispered. "She became the company's CFO 2 years ago. Matthew thought it would be good for her to be more involved in the family business." George neither confirmed nor denied my suspicion. "Mr. Mason was planning to bring in a forensic accountant. He had a meeting scheduled for—" He paused, swallowing hard. "For the day after he died." A chill ran through me. The timing couldn't be coincidental. "There's more," George continued. Mr. Mason was increasingly concerned about his physical symptoms. He said he felt fine most mornings, but by evening, especially after dinners at home, he experienced extreme fatigue, confusion, sometimes even slurred speech. His doctor attributed it to stress and possible heart problems, but Mr. Mason wasn't convinced. He thought someone was doing something to him, I said, the horrible truth dawning on me. Poisoning him. George nodded grimly. He began keeping a journal of his symptoms along with notes about who was present when the symptoms occurred. He asked me to keep it in my private safe. He slid a small leather notebook across the table. He wanted you to have this if anything happened to him. With trembling fingers, I opened the notebook. Richard's familiar handwriting filled the pages. Dates, times, symptoms, notes about who had prepared meals or drinks. A pattern emerged immediately. His worst episodes occurred on evenings when Olivia had prepared dinner or brought him his evening tea. On days when he ate out with business associates or when I cooked, he reported feeling normal. The last entry, dated the day before his death, read extreme dizziness after dinner. O brought tea to my study. Hands shaking so badly dropped pen twice. Called Dr. Weber again. Insists just anxiety. Something very wrong. Told S about odd taste in tea. She didn't notice anything. Meeting with forensic ACCT TMRW. Must protect S if suspicion's correct. Tears blurred my vision. Richard had known. He'd been trying to gather evidence to protect me, and I had missed all the signs. There's one more thing, George said gently. Mr. Mason was adamant that he had not signed any documents transferring ownership of the company. He said if any such documents surfaced after his death, they should be considered forgeries. Can we prove that? I asked, hope flickering faintly. Possibly. We'd need a forensic document examiner to analyze the signatures. But Mrs. Mason... George leaned forward, his expression grave. If what you and Mr. Mason suspected is true, you could be in serious danger. Whoever did this has already gone to extraordinary lengths. The memory of the sabotaged car flashed in my mind. Yes, I said quietly. I'm aware of that. What will you do now? He asked. I thought about Richard, about our life together, about how he had built Mason Construction from nothing, working 18-hour days while I taught elementary school and raised Matthew. How proud he'd been when our son joined the business after college, bringing fresh ideas and energy. I thought about our lakeside cabin where we'd planned to spend our retirement, fishing and reading on the porch, about how Richard would never see another sunrise over those waters. And I thought about Olivia, with her cold eyes and calculated smiles, now controlling everything Richard had built. I'm going to find out exactly what happened to my husband, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. And I'm going to take back what belongs to our family. George nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. You'll need help, professional help. Do you know someone? Yes. A private investigator named James Sullivan, former FBI agent, impeccable reputation. Discreet. He wrote a name and number on a business card. I can arrange a meeting for tomorrow. Thank you, George. One more thing. I need to find Jack Williams again. The homeless man who warned me this morning. He saw Olivia tampering with my car. He's a witness. I'll have Sullivan start looking for him right away. As I left the law office, clutching Richard's journal and George's contact information, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief and rage, fear and determination, all swirling together into something powerful. For 3 weeks I'd been drowning in sorrow, unable to make sense of Richard's sudden death. Now at least I had purpose. I hailed a taxi, giving the driver an address several blocks from my home. I didn't want to go back to my car yet, not until I knew it was safe. As we drove, I stared out the window at the town Richard and I had called home for 40 years. Everything looked the same. The park where Matthew had played as a child, the elementary school where I'd taught for 27 years, the diner where Richard and I had breakfast every Saturday. But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same. The taxi dropped me off, and I walked the remaining blocks to my house, scanning the street for Jack. He was nowhere to be seen. I entered cautiously, checking each room, half expecting Olivia to have somehow gotten in. But the house was empty, echoing with Richard's absence. I sat at our kitchen table, opened his journal again, and read every entry carefully. The pattern was undeniable. Olivia had been slowly poisoning my husband, weakening him, confusing him, until finally delivering a fatal dose. And now she'd tried to kill me too. My phone rang, startling me. Matthew's name appeared on the screen. "Mom?" His voice sounded strained. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just processing everything." "I know. It's a lot." He paused. "Listen, I've been thinking about Dad's will and that letter. It's all so strange." A flicker of hope rose in my chest. Was Matthew beginning to see through Olivia's deception? "What do you mean, strange?" I asked carefully. "The company transfer. Dad never mentioned it to me, not once, and we talked about the business every day." I heard the confusion in his voice, the hurt. Why would he do that? Cut me out of the decision? "I don't think he would, Matthew. Not your father. Olivia says he wanted to protect the company, that he was worried about my emotional decision-making." Matthew's voice took on a defensive edge. "But I've been running operations for 5 years without any problems." "You've done beautifully," I agreed. "Your father was so proud of you." "Then why? Why give everything to Olivia? It doesn't make sense." "Because he didn't," I wanted to shout. "Because your wife is a murderer who forged documents and poisoned your father and tried to kill me too." But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Not without proof. "I don't know," I said instead. "But I think we should look more closely at those transfer documents, at the timing of everything." "What do you mean?" "Just keep your eyes open, Matthew. Your father's letter mentioned falsified documents. Maybe there's more going on than we understand." There was a pause. Then, in a lowered voice, "Olivia says Dad was becoming paranoid toward the end, that the heart condition was affecting his mind. Did you see any evidence of that? Any confusion, memory problems?" Another pause. "Not really. He seemed sharp as ever at work, but at home sometimes. Olivia would say he'd forgotten conversations they'd had, appointments he'd made, conversations that only happened when you weren't present." I guess so. What are you suggesting, Mom?" I backtracked quickly. "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just trying to understand what happened. We all are." After hanging up, I stared at the phone. Matthew was questioning, but he wasn't ready to suspect his wife of something so monstrous. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would open his eyes to the truth. I called the number George had given me for James Sullivan. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Sullivan Investigations." "Mr. Sullivan, my name is Sandra Mason. George Reynolds suggested I contact you about a delicate matter." "Mrs. Mason, yes. George called. He mentioned possible financial fraud and suspicious death." Sullivan's tone was matter-of-fact, professional. "I can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. My office or your home?" "Your office would be better. I don't know if my home is safe anymore." "Understood. I'll text you the address." He paused. "Mrs. Mason, if you believe you're in immediate danger, you should consider staying elsewhere tonight." I looked around the kitchen where Richard and I had shared thousands of meals, at the living room where we'd watch TV together every evening, at the photos of our life that lined the hallway. "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I'm not going to be driven from it." then take precautions. Check all entry points, keep your phone charged and nearby. And Mrs. Mason, don't eat or drink anything that's been out of your sight. After hanging up, I followed Sullivan's advice, systematically checking every door and window, finding comfort in the routine, in taking action rather than just reacting. As I worked, my mind kept returning to Richard's journal, to his growing suspicions, to the evidence he'd been gathering. Something nagged at me, a detail I was missing, a connection I couldn't quite make. "What else did you leave me, Richard?" I whispered to the empty house. "What else did you know?" As darkness fell, I sat at Richard's desk in the home office, systematically going through his papers, looking for anything that might help. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old tax returns, I found a small key I didn't recognize. It wasn't labeled and didn't match any locks in our house. I stared at it, turning it over in my palm. Another piece of the puzzle, another clue Richard had left behind. My phone rang again, an unknown number this time. I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Mason, this is Officer Jenkins from the police department. We had a report of a disturbance near your property. Everything okay there?" I hadn't called the police, and I didn't know any Officer Jenkins. "Everything's fine," I said as he said, suddenly alert. "Who reported the disturbance?" "A neighbor, ma'am. Standard procedure to check." "Which neighbor?" A slight pause. "I'm not at liberty to say. Just doing a welfare check." My heart began to race. This wasn't right. "Could you please give me the police department number? I'd like to call back and verify." "Ma'am, that's not necessary." I hung up, immediately dialing the actual police department number I'd had programmed in my phone for years. "This is Sandra Mason at 1482 Maple Street. Did you just send an Officer Jenkins to do a welfare check at my home?" "No, ma'am," the dispatcher replied. "We don't have an Officer Jenkins on the force, and there's no record of a call to your address tonight." My blood ran cold. Someone had been trying to verify if I was home alone. Someone using a fake police identity. "Thank you," I said. "I think someone might be trying to break into my house. Could you send a patrol car?" "Right away, Mrs. Mason." I hung up and retreated to the kitchen, grabbing a large knife from the block on the counter. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly crystal clear. Olivia had failed with the car this morning. Now she was trying another approach. The doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the peephole, I could see a police uniform, but I wasn't taking any chances. "Please show your badge through the window," I called out. The officer held his badge up to the side window, and I checked it carefully against the light. It looked authentic, with the right town seal and design. I opened the door cautiously, still holding the knife behind my back. "Mrs. Mason, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Dispatch said you had a suspicious call." Relief flooded through me at the sight of the young officer, someone I recognized from community events around town. "Yes, someone claiming to be an Officer Jenkins called, asking if I was alone." Rodriguez frowned. "That's concerning. We don't have anyone by that name on the force." I explained the situation, the faked welfare check, the timing right after dark. "I'll do a sweep of the property and the street," Rodriguez assured me, "and we'll have patrols check your area regularly tonight. Do you have someone who could stay with you?" I thought of Matthew, but calling him would mean explaining why I was afraid. He wasn't ready for that yet. "No, I'll be fine. I've double-checked all the locks." After Rodriguez left, I sat in Richard's armchair in the living room, lights on, knife beside me, waiting. The mysterious phone call had confirmed what I already knew. Olivia wasn't going to wait. She would keep trying to eliminate me, the only person who stood between her and complete control of the Mason fortune. But tomorrow, I would begin fighting back. Tomorrow I would meet with Sullivan, start gathering evidence, begin the process of exposing Olivia for what she really was. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining Richard beside me, his steady presence a comfort even in memory. "I'm going to fix this, Richard," I whispered. "I promise you that." The sound of a car engine outside made me tense. I peered through the curtains to see a dark sedan pulling up across the street. A man emerged, walking purposefully toward my house. I gripped the knife tighter, heart pounding, ready to call 911. But as the porch light illuminated his face, I recognized George Reynolds. He scanned the street nervously before ringing my doorbell. I opened the door, relief washing over me. "George, what are you doing here?" His expression was grave. "Mrs. Mason, I need to tell you something. Something important. It's about Richard's death certificate. I've been going through the paperwork, and there's a discrepancy in the medical examiner's report. Something that suggests his death might not have been natural at all." I ushered him inside, closing and locking the door behind him. As he began explaining what he'd found, I knew we had reached a turning point. This wasn't just about suspicions anymore. This was the beginning of real evidence, and I was ready to follow wherever it led, no matter how dangerous the path. The morning after George's visit, I arrived at Sullivan Investigations, promptly at 9. The office was in a converted Victorian house on the edge of downtown, its exterior unremarkable but well-maintained. Just like Sullivan himself, I would soon discover. James Sullivan was a compact man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interruption as I laid out everything: Richard's sudden death, Olivia's strange behavior, the sabotaged car, the forged company transfer, the mysterious phone call, and George's discovery of discrepancies in the death certificate. "You understand what you're suggesting, Mrs. Mason?" Sullivan asked when I finished. "Murder, attempted murder, forgery, fraud, all committed by your son's wife. These are extraordinary claims." "I know exactly what I'm suggesting." I placed Richard's journal on his desk. "My husband kept this record of his symptoms. The pattern is clear. He was being systematically poisoned." Sullivan leafed through the journal, his expression giving nothing away. "What do you want from me, Mrs. Mason?" "Evidence. Proof that will convince my son and the authorities. Proof that will stand up in court." He nodded once, decisively. "I'll assign 2 investigators to your case. Maria Diaz will handle the financial and document side, tracing money, examining the signature forgeries, looking for insurance policies. Kevin Moss will manage surveillance and your personal security. And finding Jack Williams," I added, "the homeless man who saw Olivia tampering with my car. We'll find him. People on the streets have their own networks. My team knows how to navigate them." The relief of being taken seriously almost overwhelmed me. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. "There's one more thing," Sullivan said. "You need to maintain appearances. If your daughter-in-law suspects you're investigating her, she'll be more careful and potentially more dangerous. Can you act normal around her?" Could I smile at the woman who murdered my husband and tried to kill me? The woman manipulating my son? "I've taught elementary school for 30 years, Mr. Sullivan. I can certainly act when necessary." By that afternoon, Sullivan's team was in motion. I returned to the area where I'd last seen Jack, methodically checking the places homeless people gathered. The park benches, the underpass by the railroad tracks, the alley behind the supermarket. I finally found him sitting on a milk crate behind St. Michael's Church, where they ran a soup kitchen on Wednesdays. "Mrs. M." His weathered face registered surprise. "You came back?" "I said I would, Jack, and I need your help more than ever." His eyes darted nervously around us. "Not safe to talk to me. They've been asking about you." My blood ran cold. "Who's been asking?" "Man with the scar. Drove through yesterday, showing your picture. Offering $50 to anyone who's seen you talking to street folk." They were looking for Jack. the only witness to Olivia's crime. Jack, listen to me. That man is dangerous. The woman, too. They killed my husband, and they tried to kill me. He nodded solemnly. I figured it was something bad. The way they was acting. All secretive. I need to know everything you saw that night. Every detail about the man with Olivia. Jack's description was surprisingly precise. The man was tall, well-dressed in an expensive suit. He had dark hair, slicked back, and a distinctive scar beneath his right eye, about an inch long, thin like a knife cut. He wore a flashy watch and spent most of the time on his phone while working on my car. And the woman kept saying hurry up and looking around scared-like, Jack added. But the man, he was calm, like he'd done this kind of thing before. A professional, perhaps. Someone Olivia had hired to help with her dirty work. Jack, I've hired investigators who are looking into all this. Would you be willing to tell them what you saw? They can protect you. He hesitated, then nodded. For Mr. M. He was good to me. I called Kevin Moss, who arrived within 20 minutes to take Jack's statement and arrange for him to stay at a motel under an assumed name, safe from Olivia and her scarred accomplice. With Jack secure, I returned home to search for more evidence. I started with Richard's computer, a desktop in the home office that we both used. The browser history had been cleared recently, something neither Richard nor I typically did, but the download folder contained PDFs of articles on heart attacks, cardiac arrest symptoms, and untraceable poisons. More damning, in the deleted emails folder, I found correspondence between Richard and a forensic accountant named Harriet Chen, scheduled to meet the day after he died. The subject line read simply, Confidential Financial Investigation, Mason Construction. Then I found something that made my hands shake. A folder of screenshots, hidden deep in the file system. Richard had been monitoring Olivia's emails and text messages. Something so out of character for my ethical, respectful husband that it spoke volumes about his level of concern. The screenshots showed exchanges between Olivia and someone identified only as DC. Most were seemingly innocuous business discussions, but several contained coded language about the plan and taking care of the old man problem. One message from 3 days before Richard's death read, Are becoming suspicious. Found him looking through financial records. Need to accelerate timeline. The response? Don't panic. Stick to schedule. Increase dosage gradually as discussed. And then, the smoking gun. A message sent the morning after Richard died. It's done. Heart attack as predicted. Now just the old lady to deal with. Then we're clear. Meeting tomorrow to discuss next steps. I printed these messages with shaking hands. Then I searched for information about DC. Who was this person Olivia was conspiring with? A thorough search of Richard's contacts yielded a possibility. Daniel Carter, senior loan officer at First National Bank, the same bank that handled Mason Construction's accounts. Richard had his business card filed away with a handwritten note. Introduced by O. Something off about him. Check background. I called George immediately. I need you to look into someone named Daniel Carter at First National Bank. He may be Olivia's accomplice. Already on it, Mrs. Mason. Sullivan's investigator found the connection this morning. Carter has known Olivia for years. They attended the same college, though they pretended to meet through business connections after she married Matthew. Can we prove he's involved in Richard's death? We're working on it. But there's something else you should know. Your husband's nurse during his final hospitalization has been trying to reach you. Linda Thompson says she has important information she doesn't want to share over the phone. My heart raced. Set up a meeting. As soon as possible. 2 hours later, I sat across from Linda Thompson in a quiet corner of a cafe 3 towns over, far enough that we wouldn't be recognized. Linda was in her 40s, with kind eyes and the efficient manner of an experienced medical professional. Mrs. Mason, I've been troubled since your husband's death, she began. His symptoms didn't align with typical cardiac arrest. He was confused, drowsy, with unusual pupil dilation and respiratory patterns that suggested something else might be happening. "Something like poisoning?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened. "You suspect that too?" "I know it. What I need is proof." Linda glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "That's why I wanted to see you. I worked in forensic nursing before hospital care. When something doesn't feel right, I've learned to trust my instincts." She reached into her purse and withdrew a small cooler bag. "I took blood samples from your husband before he died. Off the record, I told myself it was just to run additional tests, but really," she shook her head, "I knew something was wrong, especially after I overheard your daughter-in-law on the phone outside his room saying it's nearly done and soon we'll have everything." My hands trembled as I took the cooler bag. "You kept these samples all this time?" "I didn't know what to do with them. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. I had no authority to order toxicology tests. But now, hearing your suspicions..." She met my eyes directly. "These need to be tested properly, Mrs. Mason, by an independent lab." With Linda's blood samples and Richard's journal, I now had physical evidence to support my suspicions. I called Sullivan immediately after leaving the cafe. "We need to get these blood samples tested for toxins," I told him, "specifically those that might trigger heart failure, but metabolize quickly or appear natural." "I know a lab that can handle this discreetly," Sullivan replied. "My associate will pick up the samples from you. But Mrs. Mason, be careful. If these samples show what you suspect, it confirms you're dealing with killers who've already gotten away with one murder." His warning echoed in my mind as I drove home. Olivia and her accomplice had already killed once. They'd already tried to kill me, and now I was actively gathering evidence against them. I needed to be extraordinarily careful. The next morning, Sullivan called with news. "Maria Diaz has been examining the company transfer documents. She's found irregularities in the signature and dating. The notary stamp appears authentic, but we're checking the notary's connection to Daniel Carter." "And the blood samples?" "In process. We should have results in 48 hours. He paused. "There's more. Carter took out a life insurance policy on your husband 6 months ago. $3 million, with Olivia Mason as beneficiary." My breath caught. How is that possible? Richard would never have agreed to that. The policy application has his signature, but given what we're seeing with the company transfer documents, we're assuming it's another forgery. Carter works at the bank that handles Mason Construction's insurance requirements. He would have access to signature samples. The picture was becoming clearer. Olivia and Carter had been planning this for months, forging documents, setting up insurance policies, systematically poisoning Richard, and preparing to eliminate me next. "I need to tell Matthew," I said. Sullivan hesitated. "Are you sure that's wise? Without concrete proof, he may alert his wife. He deserves to know what's happening. He's losing his inheritance. His father was murdered, and his wife is behind it all. Let's wait for the blood test results. Once we have those, we'll have irrefutable evidence." I reluctantly agreed, but my heart ached for my son. Matthew had called twice since our last conversation, his messages increasingly concerned about my strange behavior and accusations against Olivia. She was poisoning him against me, just as she had poisoned Richard with actual toxins. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw Matthew on my porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I opened the door cautiously. "Matthew, is everything okay?" His face was strained, his eyes troubled. "Can I come in, Mom? I need to talk to you." I ushered him into the living room, noting the tension in his shoulders, the worry lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" He sat heavily on the couch, running his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. Olivia's been saying things about you, that you're becoming paranoid, making accusations, that grief is affecting your judgment. And what do you think? I asked carefully. I think, he sighed deeply, I think something isn't right. Dad's letter, the company transfer I knew nothing about, your concerns about the signatures. And now Olivia's suddenly insisting we should sell the house, your house, because it's too much for you to maintain. My pulse quickened. Olivia was accelerating her plans, trying to strip away my assets. Matthew, there's something I need to tell you, but I need you to listen with an open mind. It's about your father's death, about Olivia. His expression closed immediately. Mom, if this is more accusations, it's evidence, Matthew. Real evidence that your father was poisoned, that the company transfer was forged, that Olivia and a man named Daniel Carter have been planning this for months. I showed him Richard's journal, the screenshots of the messages, explained about the blood samples Linda had preserved. With each revelation, his face grew paler, more stricken. But when I finished, he shook his head. This is crazy, Mom. You're talking about my wife, Charlie's mother, being a murderer. Olivia loved Dad. She's grieving too. Is she? Have you seen her cry once since he died? Have you seen any real grief? His silence was telling. Do you know Daniel Carter? I asked. Matthew frowned. The banker? Sure, he handles some of our business accounts. Olivia introduced us about 2 years ago. And did you know they attended college together? That they've known each other for years? What? No, that can't be right. Olivia said they met through industry connections. She lied, Matthew. They've been planning this together. The evidence is all there if you're willing to see it. He stood abruptly. I need time to process this, to think. Be careful what you say to Olivia. If she suspects, she's my wife, Mom. His voice rose in frustration. The mother of my son. You're asking me to believe she's a cold-blooded killer. I'm asking you to keep your eyes open, to pay attention. Your father tried to warn us in his letter. He knew something was wrong. Matthew left in turmoil, promising nothing except to look into some things. It wasn't the breakthrough I'd hoped for, but it was a start, a crack in his blind trust of Olivia. The next day, Sullivan called with news that changed everything. The lab found rohypnol in Richard's blood samples, he said without preamble, along with digoxin, a heart medication neither of you was prescribed. In combination, they can mimic heart attack symptoms while causing memory loss and confusion. It's almost certainly what killed him. My hand clutched the phone tighter. So we have proof. Yes, and the forensic document examiner confirms the signatures on both the company transfer and the insurance policy are forgeries. Good ones, but definitely not your husband's hand. We need to go to the police. Not quite yet. These blood samples were obtained unofficially. We need more, something that directly connects Olivia and Carter to the crime. And we need to ensure your safety before they realize we're closing in. That night I couldn't sleep. The knowledge that we had proof of Richard's murder, of Olivia's betrayal, left me both vindicated and heartbroken. My husband had been killed by someone we'd welcomed into our family, someone Matthew loved, someone little Charlie called Mommy. How would my grandson ever recover from this? Around midnight, my security system alerted me to movement on the front porch. Through the camera feed, I saw Olivia placing something by my door. She glanced furtively around, then hurried back to her car. I called Kevin Moss immediately. Olivia just left something at my door. I'm not touching it. Kevin arrived within minutes, carefully examining the small gift bag Olivia had left. Inside was a container of homemade soup and a note. Sandra, I'm worried about you. Please eat something nourishing. We all care about you. Olivia. Testing revealed the soup contained the same combination of drugs found in Richard's blood. The trap was set. Now I just needed Olivia to spring it herself. With Sullivan's team monitoring my house, I enacted the next phase of our plan. I called Olivia, my voice deliberately weak and shaky. Olivia, thank you for the soup. It was just what I needed. Sandra, her voice oozed false concern. You sound awful. Are you feeling okay? Just tired, so tired. Everything's fuzzy. Probably just need rest. Should I come over? Check on you? No, I'll be fine. Just going to sleep now. I hung up, then nodded to Kevin. She'll be calling Carter. Get ready. Sure enough, Olivia's car left her house 20 minutes later. Sullivan's team followed her to an upscale bar downtown, where she met Daniel Carter, a tall, dark-haired man with a thin scar beneath his right eye, exactly as Jack had described. Maria Diaz, positioned nearby with recording equipment, captured their entire conversation. She took the bait, Olivia said excitedly. Same symptoms Richard had. By morning, she'll be gone. Carter looked less enthusiastic. This is getting messy, Liv. First the car fails, now this rush job with the soup. We should have waited. We can't wait. She's been asking questions, looking through Richard's things. Matthew said she's making accusations. Matthew suspects something? Olivia waved dismissively. He's clueless. Thinks his mother is just grief-stricken and confused. I've made sure of that. And the nurse? The one who was asking questions about Richard's symptoms? Transferred to another hospital. She can't prove anything anyway. They discussed the company, how they planned to liquidate assets once I was out of the picture, how Matthew would be easy to manipulate with his mother and father, both gone. He trusts me completely, Olivia said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Poor Matthew, always seeing the best in everyone, just like his father. The recording was damning, a clear confession to Richard's murder and the attempt on my life. Sullivan immediately sent a copy to George Reynolds for safekeeping, then called me. We've got them, Mrs. Mason. Explicit confessions on tape. I'm taking this to Judge Wilson for warrants right now. Relief flooded through me. When will they be arrested? Tomorrow morning. The judge wants everything airtight. In the meantime, Officer Rodriguez and his partner will maintain surveillance on your house. Do not open your door for anyone, especially not Olivia or Carter. I hung up, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. After weeks of fear and grief, justice was finally within reach. Richard's murderers would pay for what they'd done. The company would return to Matthew where it belonged. But I couldn't shake a nagging worry about my son. How would Matthew handle the truth about his wife? Would he believe the evidence, or would his love for Olivia blind him even to a recorded confession? I needed to prepare him somehow, to soften the blow that was coming. I called his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried the house phone. No answer. Finally, I texted, Matthew, I need to speak with you urgently. Please call me as soon as you can. It's important. Love, Mom. Minutes stretched into hours with no response. The sky darkened as evening approached. My anxiety grew. It wasn't like Matthew not to respond to messages, especially urgent ones. Finally, around 8 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Matthew standing on the porch, his expression unreadable. It's me, Mom. We need to talk. I opened the door, relief washing over me. Matthew, I've been so worried. Didn't you get my messages? He stepped inside, not meeting my eyes. I got them. Something in his tone sent a warning signal through my brain. Is everything okay? Where's Charlie? With his grandparents, Olivia's parents. He finally looked at me, his eyes hard. Mom, I need you to stop this. All of it. The accusations, the investigations, the calls to Olivia. It needs to end. My heart sank. Matthew, listen to me. We have proof now. Real proof that Olivia poisoned your father, that she tried to poison me too. She and Daniel Carter have been planning this for years. Daniel Carter is Olivia's financial advisor. Matthew's voice rose. Of course they talk about business matters. They talk about murder, Matthew, about getting rid of your father and me. We have recordings. Recordings? You've been spying on my wife? His face flushed with anger. Do you have any idea how crazy you sound? Dad dies of a heart attack, something his own doctor confirmed, and suddenly you're spinning conspiracy theories and hiring private investigators. It's not a theory. We have evidence. I don't want to hear it, he shouted, then visibly tried to calm himself. Mom, you need help. Grief counseling, maybe medication. Olivia and I are worried about you. A chill ran through me at his words. He was completely under her spell, repeating her narrative about my mental state. Olivia is not who you think she is, I said quietly. She's been manipulating you, lying to you since the beginning. Stop it! He slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. I didn't want to do this, but you're giving me no choice. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket. This is a petition for guardianship. It states that you are no longer mentally competent to manage your affairs or make your own decisions. I stared at him, disbelieving. You're trying to have me declared incompetent? It's for your own good, Mom. You're not well. Once the court approves this, Olivia and I will manage your assets. Make sure you get proper care. In a facility somewhere? Drugged into compliance while Olivia takes everything? Anger surged through me. Is that what you want for your mother, Matthew? To be locked away so your wife can complete her plan? He flinched but held firm. You have until morning to consider this. Sign it voluntarily, or we move forward with the court process. Either way, this ends tomorrow. He headed for the door. I love you, Mom, but I won't let you tear apart our family with these delusions. After he left, I sat frozen with shock. My own son, trying to have me declared incompetent. It was Olivia's most devious move yet, using Matthew to legally strip me of my rights before the police could arrest her. I called Sullivan immediately, explaining what had happened. This changes things, he said grimly. If she gets guardianship over you, she could discredit all our evidence as the products of an unstable mind. We need to move faster. The warrants won't be processed until morning, but there might be another way to convince Matthew of the truth. How? Does he know about the blood samples? The toxicology results? I told him, but he doesn't believe me. Then we need to show him, not just tell him. And we need irrefutable proof of Olivia's involvement with Carter, something he can't explain away. A plan formed in my mind. Dangerous, potentially disastrous, but necessary. I know what to do, but I'll need your help. By midnight, everything was in place. Kevin Moss had helped me plant recording devices in Matthew and Olivia's home while they were out at a school function for Charlie. George Reynolds had prepared documents showing the forensic evidence of forgery on the company transfer, and Sullivan had coordinated with Judge Wilson to have arrest warrants ready the moment we needed them. All I had to do was get Matthew to see the truth with his own eyes. I called him at 7 a.m., my voice deliberately fragile. Matthew, it's Mom. I've been thinking about what you said, about the guardianship. I think you might be right. Maybe I do need help. His relief was palpable. Really? Oh, Mom, that's good. I just want what's best for you. I know, sweetheart. Could you and Olivia come over this morning? I'd like to discuss the arrangements in person. Make sure I understand everything. Of course. How about 9 o'clock? Perfect. And Matthew? Tell Olivia I'd like to apologize to her as well. For all the accusations. After hanging up, I took a deep breath. The endgame had begun. Sullivan and his team set up surveillance around my house, ready to record everything. George arrived early, bringing the blood test results, the forged document analysis, and the recordings of Olivia and Carter. Everything was arranged in the dining room, covered with a tablecloth until the right moment. At precisely 9 a.m., Matthew and Olivia arrived. She wore a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes, dressed impeccably as always in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Sandra," she said warmly, embracing me with those cold hands. "We're so glad you're getting the help you need." Matthew looked relieved, squeezing my shoulder. "This is the right decision, Mom. We'll take good care of you." I led them to the dining room where coffee waited. "Before we discuss the guardianship, there's something I need to show both of you." With that, I pulled away the tablecloth, revealing the evidence laid out in meticulous order. Richard's journal, the toxicology reports, the forensic analysis of the forged signatures, photographs of Olivia meeting with Carter, and a recorder ready to play their incriminating conversation. Matthew's face drained of color. "Mom, what is this?" "The truth, Matthew. All of it, with evidence you can see and hear for yourself." Olivia's mask slipped for an instant, rage flashing across her face before she composed herself. "Sandra, this is exactly what we're concerned about. These elaborate conspiracies. Play the recording, George," I said calmly. George pressed play, and Olivia's voice filled the room. "She took the bait. Same symptoms Richard had. By morning, she'll be gone." Matthew stared at his wife in horror as the recording continued, as she and Carter discussed killing Richard, attempting to kill me, manipulating Matthew, and stealing the company. When it finished, the silence was deafening. "That's not me," Olivia finally said, her voice shrill. "It's obviously fake, doctored. Matthew, you can't possibly believe this." But Matthew was staring at the toxicology report, at the signature analysis, at the photographs of Olivia and Carter together. "The scar under his eye," he whispered. "You told me you met him through business contacts, but these photos go back years." "Matthew, darling, this is ridiculous." "Did you kill my father?" His voice was barely audible. "Of course not. Your mother has clearly lost her mind. She's hired people to create all this fake evidence because she can't accept that Richard died naturally." I stayed silent, letting Matthew process what he was seeing, letting him reach his own conclusions. "The soup," he said suddenly. "You insisted on bringing Mom's soup yesterday. You wouldn't let me deliver it. Said you wanted to check on her yourself." Olivia's face hardened. "This is absurd. I'm not going to stand here and be accused by a grief-deranged old woman and her paid lackeys." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but Sullivan stepped into the doorway, blocking her exit. "Olivia Jean Mason," he said formally. "I have a warrant for your arrest for the murder of Richard Mason and the attempted murder of Sandra Mason." Two police officers appeared behind him, one holding handcuffs. "This is a mistake," Olivia said desperately, turning to Matthew. Tell them I'm innocent." But Matthew stood frozen, the evidence still clutched in his hands, tears streaming down his face as the reality of his wife's betrayal sank in. As the officers read Olivia her rights, she suddenly lunged toward me, her manicured nails reaching for my face like claws. "You ruined everything, you interfering old hag!" The officers restrained her, but not before her true nature was fully revealed to my son. In that moment, as I watched my daughter-in-law being led away in handcuffs, screaming threats and accusations, I felt no triumph, only sadness for what my family had lost, for what my son and grandson would now have to endure. Matthew collapsed into a chair, staring blankly at the wall. "I didn't see it," he whispered. "All this time and I never saw it." I sat beside him, taking his hand. "She didn't want you to see it, sweetheart. That was the whole point." Dad knew, didn't he? That's what his letter meant. About enemies smiling while holding knives. He was figuring it out. That's why they had to act when they did. Sullivan returned after Olivia was taken away. Carter's been arrested at his office. The warrants covered both of them, plus searches of their properties and electronic devices. We'll find everything, Mrs. Mason. Matthew looked up. The company? The forged transfer? We've already filed to have it invalidated, George assured him. With the evidence of forgery and the link to Richard's murder, the courts will act quickly. After Sullivan and George left, Matthew and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. Charlie. How do I tell Charlie that his mother is a murderer? My heart broke for my grandson, for the innocence he would lose. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time. I should have listened to you sooner, should have seen what was happening. You loved her, Matthew. We all want to believe in the people we love. As evening fell, Matthew finally went home to relieve Olivia's parents, who had been watching Charlie. Before he left, he hugged me tightly. I almost let her take you away, he whispered, his voice choked with tears. My own mother. But you didn't, I said firmly. When it mattered most, you saw the truth. After he left, I sat alone in Richard's favorite chair, feeling his presence around me. The nightmare wasn't over. There would be trials, publicity, painful explanations for Charlie, but the immediate danger had passed. Olivia and Carter were behind bars. The company would return to Matthew. The truth about Richard's death was known. I looked at our wedding photo on the mantel, at Richard's kind, intelligent eyes. We did it, I whispered. We got justice for you. As if in answer, a sense of peace settled over me, the first real peace I'd felt since Richard died. The journey wasn't over, but at least now I could see the path ahead. And I wasn't walking it alone. I woke the morning after Olivia's arrest to find my house surrounded by news vans. The story had broken overnight. Prominent businesswoman arrested for murdering her father-in-law and attempting to kill her mother-in-law. The salacious details were too juicy for the media to resist. Poison, forgery, millions of dollars at stake. I drew my curtains and ignored the doorbell. My phone rang constantly until I silenced it. The vultures could wait. My priority now was Matthew and Charlie. When George Reynolds called, I answered immediately. Mrs. Mason, I'm sorry about the media circus, but I have concerning news. Daniel Carter made bail this morning. My blood ran cold. How is that possible? He's accused of murder. His family has connections. His father is a former state senator who still pulls strings. The judge set bail at $2 million, which they paid immediately. Is he a flight risk? We've requested his passport be surrendered, but until the trial... George's tone conveyed his worry. You should consider staying elsewhere for a while. I thought of leaving my home, the house where Richard and I had built our life together. No, I won't be driven away. Then at least accept additional security. Sullivan's team can... A sharp knock at my door interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw Officer Rodriguez standing on my porch, his expression grim. George, I need to call you back. The police are here. I opened the door cautiously. Officer Rodriguez? Mrs. Mason. He removed his hat. I'm afraid I have troubling news. Jack Williams was found dead this morning. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Jack? How? It appears to be an overdose, but given the circumstances... Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. The timing is suspicious. He was your only eyewitness to the car tampering. Jack's weathered face flashed in my mind, his kindness in warning me, his courage in coming forward. Now he was dead. Another life destroyed by Olivia and Carter's greed. This wasn't an overdose, I said firmly. Jack had been clean for months. He told me himself. Rodriguez nodded. We're investigating thoroughly. In the meantime, I've been assigned to your security detail. I'll be outside your house until my relief arrives at 8. After he left, I called Sullivan. They've killed Jack. Our witness is gone. Sullivan's voice was grim. I just heard. Carter must have arranged it after making bail. But don't panic, Mrs. Mason. Jack's formal statement was already recorded and notarized. His testimony remains admissible in court. But the jury won't see him, won't hear directly from him how Olivia and that man tampered with my car. We still have the recordings of Olivia and Carter discussing the attempt on your life. We have the forensic evidence of forgery. We have the poisoned soup and the toxicology report from Richard's blood samples. One witness won't make or break this case. I wanted to believe him, but a nagging doubt remained. Carter was free, connections to power, and had already proven he was willing to eliminate witnesses. What about Matthew and Charlie? I asked. Are they safe? I've arranged security for them, too. And Mrs. Mason? Sullivan's voice softened slightly. Get some rest. The preliminary hearing is tomorrow and you'll need your strength. Rest seemed impossible. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Jack's face, Richard's journal entries, Olivia's cold smile. After tossing and turning for an hour, I got up and went to Richard's study. The mysterious key I'd found earlier still puzzled me. It wasn't for our safe deposit box or any lock in our house. I turned it over in my palm, studying its unusual shape. Then a memory surfaced. Richard mentioning a private storage locker he'd rented years ago to store sensitive company documents. Could this be the key? I called Matthew. Do you remember your father ever mentioning a storage unit? Somewhere he kept important papers? Yeah, actually. A small place down by the industrial park. Secure space storage, I think. Why? I found a key that might fit it. Can you meet me there? An hour later, Matthew and I stood before Unit 117 at Secure Space Storage. The manager had confirmed that Richard Mason had indeed rented this unit for over 10 years, paying annually in advance. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, the lock clicking open. Matthew pulled up the rolling door, revealing a small, meticulously organized space. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. Cardboard boxes labeled by year occupied the opposite side. In the center stood a desk with a laptop computer, an old model but well-maintained. Dad's emergency backup system, Matthew murmured, recognizing the setup. He always said important records should exist in 3 places: the office, the cloud, and somewhere physical only he knew about. I approached the laptop and pressed the power button. It hummed to life, requesting a password. Try your birthday, Matthew suggested. I typed in 03/22/1945. Access denied. Our wedding anniversary? 06/14/1981. Another rejection. Matthew stepped forward. Let me try something. He typed rapidly. Sandra met Charlie. The screen unlocked, revealing a desktop with meticulously labeled folders. Our names, I said softly. His password was our names. That was Dad, Matthew replied, his voice thick with emotion. Family first, always. We spent the next 2 hours combing through Richard's digital archive. It was a treasure trove. Decades of business records, personal financial documents, and, most critically, a folder labeled Concerns 2023-2024. Inside were screenshots of emails between Olivia and Daniel Carter dating back 3 years, long before Richard's death. Richard had been monitoring their communications for months, documenting their relationship, their plans to take over the company. Most damning was a document titled Timeline Doc, Richard had meticulously tracked every suspicious incident over the past year. Olivia gaining access to company banking records. Carter being introduced as a financial advisor. Unusual transactions to offshore accounts. The onset of Richard's mysterious symptoms after Olivia began bringing him tea each evening. The final entry, dated the day before his death, read, "Meeting with forensic accountant tomorrow. If findings confirm suspicions, will confront O and contact authorities. Must protect S and M at all costs." My eyes filled with tears. Richard had known. He had been gathering evidence, preparing to expose them, and they had killed him before he could act. "He was trying to protect us both," I whispered. Matthew stared at the screen, his face ashen. All this time, I thought, I believed. She fooled us all, Matthew. That was her specialty. We copied everything onto a flash drive for Sullivan and the prosecutors. This new evidence strengthened our case immeasurably, providing documentation of the conspiracy in Richard's own words. As we locked up the storage unit, Matthew turned to me. "Charlie's been asking about his mother. What do I tell him?" My heart ached for my 5-year-old grandson, innocent in all this tragedy. "The truth, but gently, that Mommy did something very wrong and has to face consequences." "And when he asks when she's coming home?" I had no easy answer for that. "One day at a time, sweetheart. We'll figure it out together." Back at my house, Sullivan and the district attorney, Elaine Winters, reviewed Richard's files with growing excitement. "This is exactly what we needed," Winters said, a petite woman with formidable energy. "Richard Mason's contemporaneous documentation of his suspicions creates a compelling narrative for the jury. Combined with the physical evidence, we have an extremely strong case." "What about Carter making bail?" I asked. "Is he a threat to this case?" Winter's expression hardened. "In light of Jack Williams' death, I'm filing a motion to revoke Carter's bail as a danger to witnesses. The hearing is tomorrow morning." "And Olivia?" Matthew asked. "Still in custody. No bail was granted given the severity of the charges and flight risk assessment." After they left, Matthew lingered, reluctant to return to the empty house he'd shared with Olivia. "Stay here tonight," I offered. "Charlie, too. There's plenty of room." Matthew nodded gratefully. "I'll pick him up from the sitters. He'll be happy to stay at Grandma's." Alone briefly, I sat in Richard's chair, overwhelmed by the day's discoveries. "You were always 10 steps ahead," I whispered to his memory. "Even now, you're still protecting us." That night, with my son sleeping in his childhood bedroom and my grandson curled up in the guest room surrounded by stuffed animals, I finally found a measure of peace. We were broken, wounded by betrayal, but we were together, and tomorrow we would begin the fight for justice. The preliminary hearing was a blur of legal terminology and procedural motions. Carter's bail was revoked after evidence linked him to Jack's death. Security footage showing his car near the motel where Jack had been staying. Cell records placing his phone in the vicinity. Over the next 3 months, our lives revolved around the legal process. Depositions, evidence hearings, motions filed and contested. The district attorney pursued maximum charges: first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and forgery. Throughout this period, the media remained relentless. "Black Widow businesswoman," screamed one headline. "Deadly daughter-in-law's poison plot," declared another. Reporters ambushed us outside the courthouse, shouting questions about Richard's final moments, about Matthew's feelings toward his murderous wife. Matthew retreated into himself, focusing solely on Charlie and the company. Mason Construction had been returned to his control pending trial outcome, but the damage from Olivia's brief tenure was substantial. Clients had fled amid the scandal, employees were uncertain, and the financial irregularities she and Carter had engineered had left the books in disarray. Dad built this company from nothing, Matthew told me one evening, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. I won't let her destroy it. Charlie, meanwhile, asked daily when his mother would come home. The court had appointed a child psychologist to help him process the trauma, but how do you explain to a 5-year-old that his mother murdered his grandfather and tried to kill his grandmother? Mommy did something very bad, was all Matthew could manage. She has to stay away for a while. The trial finally began in late October, 7 months after Richard's death. The courtroom was packed with media, curious public, and family members from both sides. Olivia's parents sat stone-faced in the front row, having stood by their daughter despite the overwhelming evidence. I testified first, recounting Richard's decline, the suspicious symptoms, finding the cut cable in my car, the poisoned soup Olivia had delivered. Defense attorneys tried to paint me as a vindictive mother-in-law, jealous of Olivia's youth and influence over my son. Isn't it true, Mrs. Mason, that you never approved of your son's marriage? Olivia's lawyer asked, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I welcomed Olivia into our family, I replied steadily. I trusted her with my son, my grandson, and my husband. That trust was betrayed in the most horrific way imaginable. Matthew's testimony was heart-wrenching. He described finding his father unresponsive that fateful morning, Olivia's strange calmness, the gradual realization that his wife had been manipulating him for years. She would bring my father tea every evening, he said, his voice breaking. Special tea, she called it, to help with his stress. I thought she was being kind. Linda Thompson, the nurse who had preserved Richard's blood samples, provided crucial testimony about his unusual symptoms. The forensic toxicologist explained how the combination of rohypnol and digoxin had triggered Richard's cardiac arrest while leaving minimal traces, a sophisticated poisoning method that required medical knowledge to execute. George Reynolds presented the forged company transfer documents, the handwriting expert detailing 14 distinct discrepancies between Richard's actual signature and the forgeries. But the most damning evidence came from Richard himself, his journal documenting his symptoms, the files from his secret storage unit showing his investigation of Olivia and Carter, and his final letter warning about falsified documents. Through it all, Olivia sat expressionless, occasionally whispering to her attorneys. She had transformed her appearance for the trial. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup, replaced by modest dresses and minimal cosmetics. A calculated attempt to appear humble, sympathetic. Carter, meanwhile, seemed to age years during the proceedings. His once confident demeanor crumbled as the evidence mounted. During a particularly damning testimony about Jack Williams' death, I caught him staring at Olivia with unmistakable hatred. The prosecution's final evidence was the recording of Olivia and Carter discussing my symptoms after delivering the poisoned soup. The courtroom fell silent as Olivia's voice filled the air. By morning she'll be gone. When it was the defense's turn, they tried desperately to create reasonable doubt. They suggested Richard had dementia, explaining his paranoid journal entries. They claimed the blood samples had been contaminated. They even suggested I had forged the documents myself to frame Olivia out of jealousy. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Olivia took the stand. Gone was the cold, calculating woman I knew. In her place sat a tearful, seemingly broken young mother, professing her innocence between delicate sobs. I loved Richard like a father, she claimed, dabbing at her eyes. I would never hurt him. Never. In the recorded conversation with Mr. Carter, the prosecutor asked. Taken out of context, Olivia insisted. We were discussing business matters. The soup was just chicken soup, a family recipe I made to help Sandra feel better during her grief. And why did you tell Mr. Carter that by morning she'll be gone after delivering this soup? Olivia hesitated. I meant her sadness, that the nourishment would help her feel better. The prosecutor's expression showed her disbelief. Mrs. Mason, we have toxicology reports confirming the soup contained the same drugs that killed your father-in-law. How do you explain that? Someone must have tampered with it, Olivia replied, her voice hardening slightly. Maybe Sandra herself to frame me. I kept my expression neutral, though inwardly I marveled at her audacity. Even now, cornered by evidence, she was spinning lies, creating alternative narratives. Carter's testimony came next, and it delivered the final blow to their defense. Facing decades in prison and without Olivia's acting skills, he crumbled under cross-examination. Yes, we planned it together, he finally admitted, shoulders slumped in defeat. It was Olivia's idea initially. She said Richard was suspicious of the company finances, that he was going to discover the money we'd been diverting. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Olivia's mask of innocence slipped, revealing naked fury as she glared at her former accomplice. She said it would be easy, Carter continued, seemingly relieved to unburden himself. Richard already had heart issues. The right combination of drugs would look natural. Then we'd deal with Sandra, gain control of everything. And Jack Williams? The prosecutor asked. Carter looked down. I hired someone. Olivia was furious that he'd prevented Sandra's accident. She said loose ends needed tying up. By the time closing arguments concluded, the outcome seemed inevitable. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning their verdict. On the count of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Olivia Jean Mason, guilty. Each subsequent charge received the same response. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Carter received identical verdicts, though his last-minute cooperation would likely reduce his sentence. I felt no triumph as I watched Olivia being led away in handcuffs, her careful facade finally shattered, screaming accusations at Carter, at the jury, at me. Only a profound sadness for all that had been lost. Richard's life, Matthew's marriage, Charlie's mother. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward us, shouting questions. I ignored them all, keeping my arm firmly around Matthew's shoulders as we made our way to the waiting car. It's over, he said quietly once we were inside. Dad has justice. But it wasn't really over. Sentencing would follow. Appeals would be filed. And the deeper wounds, the betrayal, the loss, the shattered trust, those would take much longer to heal. That evening, Matthew, Charlie, and I sat together at my kitchen table, sharing a simple dinner. Charlie pushed his food around, unusually quiet. Is Mommy in jail forever? He finally asked, his small voice piercing my heart. Matthew and I exchanged glances. For a very long time, Matthew answered gently. What she did was very serious. Charlie considered this. Did she really hurt Grandpa? Yes, sweetheart, I said softly. I'm sorry, but she did. Why? The innocent question hung in the air. How could we explain avarice, murderous ambition, and sociopathic manipulation to a child? Sometimes people want things so badly they make terrible choices, Matthew finally said. Mommy wanted money and power more than she wanted to do what was right. Charlie nodded solemnly, processing this in his 5-year-old way. Then he looked up, his eyes, so like Richard's, filled with a wisdom beyond his years. We won't do that, right, Daddy? We'll always choose what's right. Matthew gathered his son into his arms, tears streaming down his face. Always, buddy. Always. The weeks after the verdict passed in a blur of paperwork and procedures. Olivia was sentenced to 35 years without possibility of parole for Richard's murder, with additional concurrent sentences for the attempts on my life and the financial crimes. Carter received 20 years with the possibility of parole after 12. His sentence reduced for testimony against Olivia. Slowly, life began to find a new rhythm. Matthew threw himself into rebuilding Mason Construction, working tirelessly to restore its reputation and financial stability. Charlie started kindergarten, gradually smiling more, talking about his mother less. And I drifted, unsure of my place in this altered world. Richard was gone. Justice had been served. What now? The answer came unexpectedly, 6 months after the trial ended. I was sorting through Richard's things, a task I'd postponed for too long, when I found a business card tucked into his wallet. Second Chance Shelter, it read, with an address in the downtown area I rarely visited. Curious, I drove there the next morning. The shelter occupied an old warehouse, converted into a clean but Spartan facility, providing meals and beds for the homeless. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes greeted me at the reception desk. "Can I help you?" "I found this card in my husband's wallet. Richard Mason? I'm wondering what connection he had to this place." Her face lit up with recognition. "Mrs. Mason, we've been hoping you might visit someday. Your husband was one of our biggest supporters. He volunteered every Wednesday morning serving breakfast, and his donations kept our lights on during the lean months." I blinked in surprise. Richard had never mentioned this place, this commitment. "He came here weekly?" "Like clockwork for over 5 years. She gestured toward a wall of photos. There, among images of volunteers and clients, was Richard, serving food, playing chess with an elderly man, laughing with a group that included a painfully thin figure I recognized immediately. "Jack?" I whispered. "You knew Jack Williams?" the woman asked. "He was one of Richard's special projects. Your husband was helping him get treatment for his head injury, trying to reconnect him with his estranged daughter in Oregon." Tears filled my eyes. This secret generosity, this extension of kindness to those society overlooked, it was so perfectly Richard. And suddenly I understood why Jack had recognized him, why he'd felt compelled to warn me that fateful morning. Is there anything I can do?" I asked. "To continue what Richard started?" The shelter needed everything: funding, volunteers, professional services for clients. Before I knew it, I'd committed to coming weekly, to reviewing their financial systems, to establishing a proper foundation to support their work. When I told Matthew about the shelter, about Richard's secret volunteering, he wasn't surprised. "That was Dad," he said simply. "Always helping, never talking about it." 2 weeks later, Matthew and Charlie joined me at the shelter. Charlie helped serve muffins, his small hands carefully placing each one on waiting plates. Matthew, with his construction expertise, immediately noticed structural issues in the aging building and began making plans for renovations. It became our family project, our way of honoring Richard's memory, of transforming our grief and pain into something meaningful. The Mason Foundation for New Beginnings was established, providing housing assistance, medical care, and job training for homeless individuals. 1 year after Richard's death, we held a dedication ceremony for the new Richard Mason Center for Community Support, a completely renovated facility with dormitories, classrooms, medical clinic, and dining hall. The mayor attended, as did many of Richard's former business associates, curious about this hidden side of the man they thought they'd known. Standing at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd, shelter residents, volunteers, community members, I felt Richard's presence strongly. "My husband believed that true wealth isn't measured by what you own," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion. "It's measured by what you give, by how you treat people who can offer you nothing in return, by the good you do when no one is watching." In the front row, Charlie sat on Matthew's lap, fidgeting slightly in his little suit, but beaming with pride. Beside them sat Emma, Matthew's new friend, not girlfriend yet, but a kind woman who volunteered teaching art classes at the shelter. Time would tell where that relationship might lead. Richard's legacy isn't just a successful business, I continued. It's the lives he touched through quiet generosity. It's the example he set for his son and grandson. And it's this center which will continue his work of seeing the dignity in every person, regardless of their circumstances. As we cut the ribbon and people streamed into the new facility, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, deeper and more genuine than anything I'd experienced since Richard's death. The wound would always be there, the absence never fully filled, but something new had grown alongside the grief. Purpose, community, a way forward. That evening, back home, I found myself alone in Richard's study. I ran my fingers over his books, his desk, the framed family photos he'd treasured. "We did it," I whispered to his memory. "We got justice. We protected Matthew and Charlie, and now we're building something good from all the pain." A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Charlie stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, a storybook clutched to his chest. "Grandma, will you read to me? Daddy says you do the best voices." I smiled, gathering my precious grandson into my arms. "Of course, sweetheart. Always." As we settled into the rocking chair, Charlie snuggled against me with complete trust. I realized that this moment of simple love and connection was the true victory. Not the courtroom triumph, not the financial recovery, but the preservation of what mattered most: family, compassion, integrity. Olivia had sought to destroy all of that with her poison and lies. She had seen only dollar signs where Richard and I saw the true wealth of family bonds and human dignity. In her prison cell, serving year 1 of 35, she had nothing but time to reflect on what her greed had cost her, and we, the family she'd tried to devastate, were not merely surviving. We were rebuilding, growing, finding meaning in service to others. "Grandma?" Charlie looked up from his book, his innocent eyes serious. "Are we okay now?" I kissed his forehead, my heart full. "Yes, Charlie, we're okay now." And for the first time since that terrible morning when a homeless man's scream had saved my life, I truly believed it. 6 months later, I stood at Richard's grave, fresh flowers in my hands. The headstone was simple, elegant, just as he would have wanted. Beneath his name and dates, the inscription read, "His legacy lives on in lives touched and hearts changed." "You'd be proud of Matthew," I told him, arranging the flowers in the built-in vase. "The company is thriving again. He's introducing sustainable building practices, just like you always wanted to. And Charlie, he's growing so fast, reading everything he can get his hands on. He has your curiosity, your kindness." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree shading the grave. I liked to think it was Richard, acknowledging my words. The foundation helped 15 people find permanent housing last month. 3 have new jobs. Jack's daughter came from Oregon for the memorial service we held for him. She had no idea what happened, how he saved my life. She's volunteering at the center now, helping others with brain injuries like his. I sat on the small bench we'd installed, watching sunlight filter through the branches above. "I miss you every day, but I'm okay. We're all okay. And that's because of you. The example you set, the foundation you built, the love you gave us." As I walked back to my car, I noticed a young woman hesitating near the cemetery entrance. She looked familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. "Mrs. Mason?" she called, approaching cautiously. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Jennifer Carter, Daniel's daughter." I tensed slightly. What could Daniel Carter's daughter possibly want from me? I wanted to apologize," she said, her eyes downcast, "for what my father did, for what happened to your husband. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am." The genuine remorse in her voice touched me. "Thank you, Jennifer. That can't be easy." She shook her head. "Nothing about this is easy, but I'm trying to make amends in whatever way I can. I've been volunteering at the Richard Mason Center, not using my last name, of course." "You're Jen? The new computer skills teacher?" I'd heard about the young woman who'd revamped the center's technology program, helping residents learn marketable skills. She nodded, looking relieved at my recognition. It felt like the right thing to do, to try to create something positive after so much destruction. We walked together toward the parking lot, talking about the center, about the residents she was helping. Not once did she attempt to defend her father or minimize his crimes. She was simply a young woman trying to find her own path through the wreckage of her family's disgrace. "Would you join us for dinner sometime?" I found myself asking as we reached our cars. "Matthew and Charlie would like to meet you." The surprise in her eyes mirrored my own inner astonishment at the invitation. A year ago, I would never have imagined breaking bread with anyone connected to the Carter name. But life had taught me that healing comes in unexpected ways, that redemption stories can emerge from the darkest tragedies. "I'd like that," Jennifer said softly. "Very much." As I drove home, I thought about the strange, winding path that had brought me here. From the terror of that morning when Jack saved my life, through the pain of discovery and the grueling fight for justice, to this new chapter of rebuilding and unexpected connections. Richard had always said that true wealth wasn't in what you owned, but in what you did with what you had. In how you treated people who couldn't give you anything in return. In sleeping peacefully, knowing you'd done the right thing even when no one was watching. I had lost my husband, but found a mission. Matthew had lost his wife, but rediscovered his purpose. Charlie had lost his mother, but gained a community that embraced and nurtured him. And even Jennifer had found a path toward redemption, separate from her father's crimes. Not a fairy tale ending, perhaps. The scars would always remain, but a good ending nonetheless. An ending with meaning, with purpose, with the quiet dignity that comes from facing darkness and choosing light. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Matthew and Charlie waiting on the porch, waving excitedly. Emma stood slightly behind them, smiling warmly, her art class supplies still in her hands. Family, not defined by blood or perfect circumstances, but by love and choice and shared purpose. "We're having pizza," Charlie announced as I approached. "And Emma's staying too." "Perfect," I said, embracing my grandson, then my son, then welcoming Emma with a warm smile. "Absolutely perfect." And despite everything, at that moment it truly was. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. I'm glad to have heard from so many of you who found strength in this story. Remember, sometimes the people we think are weakest, like a 68-year-old grandmother, turn out to be the strongest fighters of all. And true wealth is never about money. It's about integrity, love, and using what you have to make the world better for others.